Chapter 16. Up to Me. Sky hummed a jaunty tune while cooking spaghetti on her orange camp stove for lunch that evening. When the phone rang, she startled. It was such a rare sound nowadays. Service had become spotty enough that when one of them worked it almost seemed surprising. She raced to the phone and answered. "Hello," Tricia said, the relief in her voice apparent. "Hi back." Sky almost bounced in happiness as she turned off the gas to the cooker. "Oh my lord, Sky, I'm so grateful to hear your voice. We all been calling and calling you and there hasn't been an answer. What have you been doing?" Tricia started out anxious but ended on an angry note. Sky had a vague recollection of the phone ringing when she had been in the throes of her feverish delirium. She hurried to reassure Tricia. "I'm fine, don't worry." "Really, I am." "I was." Her voice trailed off as she raised a hand to her cheek. "Well, you won't believe this, but I was sick. I got over it though, like, actually over it. I am totally fine now." "Sky," Tricia whispered, "no." "I'm fine, Tricia." "I am." Tricia was quiet for a moment before saying, "How can that be?" "Well, I'm not sure, but I am. And there has to be more than me, and I wonder how many." 2 days before I got ill, I drove to Fenton for my final appointments and groceries. When Tricia uttered an exasperated sigh, Sky ignored it and told Tricia everything she'd learned at the hospital, and her frightening experience on the street outside her office. "Oh, Sky. I can't believe what happened. You should have called us." "Well, I got home fine, and when I got sick, there was nothing to do." "I didn't want you or Tom to come over here and become exposed," Sky said. "Please understand that I couldn't have that on me. No more going into the city. You hear me?" Tricia scolded Sky. "And I'm sending Tom around to make sure you're okay." "I totally agree. No more Fenton for me. It's a whole different place right now." Sky shuddered as she remembered the empty buildings, and the streets deserted of almost everyone but the infected. "And it isn't necessary, but it would be nice to see Tom." Sky asked Tricia how some of their friends in town were doing before inquiring if she had any news of Jesse. Tricia reluctantly spoke. "Well, that's one thing I called about. Mom saw him the other day roaming the woods at her place. She tried to get him to sit a spell and have some pie, but he wouldn't. Wouldn't even get up close to her, she said. It's not like him. Not with them, it's not. She saw marks though. Near as she could tell, Frankie's been beaten on him pretty hard." Sky felt the color drain from her face, and she drew her lip between her teeth. She sank onto the marble countertop, propping her elbows on it and scraping her hair back with one hand. No. No, no. This was the news she'd feared. She imagined the fear on Jesse's dirty little face as he peeked out from behind the trees, not knowing where to go. She thought of her list of regular support systems before, one by one, discarding them as useless. Sky tapped her lips with her forefinger, then covered her mouth with her hand. "Who is available to help? All the offices are closed. And if by some miracle I reach someone, and they get him, where will they put him? Somewhere he will be exposed to the AG flu?" "Sky?" Tricia said, reminding her she was still on the phone. "Oh, Tricia, what are we going to do?" "Well, Mom's gonna be looking out for him. If he comes around again, she'll try and get him to come into the house. If he does, Dad will bring him here, and Tom will get help for him. Dad's aching to go on over there, but we're worried Frankie'd be, well, too much for Dad to handle. You know how he gets." Sky hated to turn down anyone willing to help Jesse, but she agreed that a drunk Frankie was often dangerous. In a bad mood, he could easily overtake Tricia's dad. Her brows creased. "Why can't Tom get him?" Sympathy and worry filled Trisha's voice. It's a fair ways out there. He's been working almost 20 hours a day and can't keep up as it is. He hardly lays his head down at night anymore. Things are crazy, just insane, and he needs to care for the worst cases first. I'm sorry, Sky. Sky nodded. Her cousin always did his best, and if even half the news was true, she wondered how Tom was getting any sleep at all. But where does that leave Jessie? Trisha continued. Tom agrees what's happening to Jessie is bad, but he has to prioritize, and it's not life and death. Tom doesn't like it, but he has to. He says if he gets any kind of time, he's gonna head straight over there. That may not be enough. And I disagree, I think it is life and death. Sky's voice hardened as she tapped one painted fingernail on the countertop. Sky, don't be gettin' any wild ideas. That ain't like you. Let the system handle this. It's there for a reason, you always say. True, Trisha, Sky said. She wished it was like her. But even on a good day, I had to babysit the system, and these aren't good days. The system is gone. Trisha continued to throw out objections. Frankie's dangerous. Remember that fight he got into a few months ago? The other guy was a mess. That's exactly my point. Jesse can't hold his own against him. The boy needs to be removed now. Jesse's gettin' beat on, and there's no doubt it needs to stop. But Frankie is gonna hurt someone else more than his own kid. Trisha, you're assuming he's a normal father with normal fatherly instincts. He is not. Especially when he's drinking. Sky walked to the large window beside her dining room table and looked out on the empty street. I understand what he is. I was raised up with him. Trisha reminded her. You know a part of him. And I know a different part. I treat what is left of his child. Sky set her hand on her hip. She would allow no argument on this point. Please, Sky, don't make me sorry I told you this. I reckoned if you saw Jesse wandering around town, you could, keep him at your house. No, don't be sorry. Sky's gaze strayed from one house to another, most of which were showing signs of abandonment. It's just there's no one. Jesse has no one. I'm the closest person he has that can help him. And believe me, he hasn't let me all that close. He's so guarded, it's like he's in a dark cave, and he swipes out at anyone coming toward him. Jesse won't reach out for help. He wouldn't even grasp how to do that. Sky let out a long sigh. I'll watch for him. Please tell me if anyone sees him again. The women said goodbye, promising to call the next day again if their phones had a signal. Sky tried to put Jessie out of her mind, but as the day wore on, she became more and more agitated. She tried reading, using her bit of remaining battery on her iPad to watch a downloaded Friends, and even resorted to cleaning, but nothing worked. Her thoughts kept wandering back to Jessie and Frankie. All her other kids had someone to turn to when the mistreatment became worse, somewhere they went to get a break from the intense pressure of living with an abuser. But not Jesse. He was a child, alone, with no way out. Sky was that person for him, the person he could talk to when he wanted, the person who helped him see things could be better. Now, when his life had improved for possibly the first time, Jesse was lost again, this time with no hope of rescue. How am I supposed to just sit here knowing what is going on in that household? The boy needs help. He needs me. Who else will stop what is happening to Jesse? Thoughts rolled through her head. Anna Lynn telling her the world would never be the same. Estimates that 70 to 80% of the population would be dead within the year. That Tom couldn't make it to Jesse. Frankie's past violence, even against his own son. There was no longer any structure to take care of these kinds of problems, and who knew when it would be in place again? In an unthinkable world, you can do unthinkable things. The thought flashed through Sky's mind almost like a neon sign. It both terrified and exhilarated her, but she closed her eyes against it. Still, it wouldn't go away. Unlike others, she could use the lack of structure for good. Sky shook her head. Never before would such an idea have formed to a solid conclusion. To illegally take someone's kid, even from someone like Frankie. But now, with things the way they are, it leaves it up to us. Up to me. Can I do this? Sky looked at her pampered hands and her designer jeans and t-shirt. She scoffed at her anxiety-ridden self. I'm hardly the savior type. But I've got to, I'm all Jesse's got. Frankie had been given every chance. He had proven what kind of man, what kind of father he is, a long time ago. He was not a man to raise a child, even if that child was his. Sky looked at her shaking hands. Her bracelets lightly chimed as they tapped against each other. Are you actually talking yourself into this? Jesse isn't safe with him. Frankie will go too far one day, and in a drunken rage, kill him. No one may notice one's small, disappeared 10-year-old boy with all the chaos going on. And if they did, all Frankie would have to say is he got sick. Who would question him? The unthinkable was no longer so unlikely, but plausible, even reasonable. Sky squared her shoulders. It was time to save Jesse.